What is desire, if not the attempt to fill a void that perhaps was never yours to begin with? This question may seem unsettling, but it can also trigger a deep sense of freedom. From an early age, we learn to desire in the same way we learn to speak, by mimicking what we hear and see. First, our parents, then our friends, teachers, commercials, influencers, and the edited images on social media. Over time, these examples shape what we believe we want. Desire becomes automatic, almost instinctive. You feel the need to consume, to achieve, to grow, to improve, not because you discovered what truly drives you, but because you learned that not acting is like disappearing. Think about the moment you find yourself wanting a new phone, even though the one you have works perfectly, or yearning for a body you saw in a video, even though you never truly felt that longing before. That impulse doesn't arise out of nowhere. It's fueled by carefully crafted stimuli designed to create a sense of lack that you can't quite explain. This happens all the time, and often slips by unnoticed. But eventually, that dynamic starts to break down. What once felt natural now brings discomfort. The goals that used to guide your life lose their shine. Motivation fades, exhaustion settles in. You begin to wonder, am I truly chasing something that came from within me, or was it carefully planted by invisible influences? That doubt doesn't shout, it whispers. And once it appears, it can't be ignored. It's at this point that real freedom is born, not as a deliberate choice, but as a rupture, and also as a kind of pain. If you don't know where your desire comes from, how can you trust your feelings? How can you tell whether you're moving closer to yourself, or simply drifting further away from what others expect of you? Desire, once an intimate compass, reveals itself as a pre-programmed path, one followed by millions of people, all believing they're forging their own way. Realizing this is painful. Denying it means clinging to an illusion that slowly consumes you. The tension between the comfort of what's familiar and the risk of seeing the truth marks the beginning of real transformation. Anyone who dares ask this question, even without finding the answer, is already in motion. Because true freedom begins the moment you recognize, perhaps you were never really free. This realization doesn't happen by accident. There's a structure that lays the groundwork for what you come to desire. Jacques Lacan called this structure the other. The other is not a specific person, but everything that came before you. Language, symbols, social rules, the roles you were given. Imagine the other as a room of infinite mirrors. Each mirror reflects an image shaped by external expectations. You grow up seeing those images and gradually start to believe they're yours. Through these reflections, you learn to name the world, to identify what's valuable, what's beautiful, what's acceptable, and what should be desired. Desire, then, does not emerge from a spontaneous impulse. It is cultivated within this collective grammar where each person occupies a place they didn't choose. You grow up hearing that you must study hard, stand out, be successful, start a family, leave a legacy. Even when you think you're making personal choices, many of them were already preset in a symbolic menu you never created. For Lacan, desire is always a response to a lack structured before you were even conscious. That emptiness isn't natural. It's implanted through social mirrors and learned as a personal necessity. That doesn't mean desire is fake, but that it's guided. It follows the flow of recognition. You learn that certain goals are admired, certain behaviors respected, certain lifestyles praised. So you begin to desire what makes you fit in, what confirms your image as someone who's functioning in the world. But this adaptation comes at a high cost. Many impulses you believe are yours are actually forms of symbolic survival. Small compromises made to fit in, acts of self-censorship disguised as choices. Once you start to see this, desire loses its automatic grip. The autopilot fails. A strange feeling sets in, and with it, a void. Where there used to be impulse, there's now hesitation. Where there was certainty, there's now doubt. It's within this pause that the possibility of rebuilding is born. Because only those who realize how much they've been shaped can begin to shape themselves. And it's precisely in that moment that the system shows its cunning. The void that emerges when you start questioning your desires doesn't remain empty for long. The world around you already has a ready-made answer: consumption. This is where Zygmunt Bauman comes in. If Lacan showed that desire is structured by language and absence, Bauman reveals how modern society captures that absence and turns it into a marketplace. The lack, which could be a space for introspection and discovery, is converted into a commodity. Desire, which should be intimate and personal, becomes a shelf product. You're no longer someone who feels a lack and turns inward to understand it. Now, you're a consumer who must act, click, order, acquire. Urgency replaces reflection. Instant satisfaction takes the place of deep listening. What you lack becomes someone else's profit. The cruelest part is that even once you become aware of this, the mechanism still works. Some may argue that this abundance of options, tools, and opportunities for consumption is a privilege of modern society. They believe freedom lies in the multitude of choices we have today. But freedom without awareness is just distraction. This overload of options serves one purpose: to keep you in constant motion, never reaching any true sense of fulfillment. The system operates with a clear logic. If you feel whole, you stop running. If you're at peace, there's no need to show off. So everything around you is structured to feed the idea that something is always missing. There's always a new level to reach, a new thing to buy, a new goal to chase. You're no longer controlled through fear, but through the promise of a fulfillment that never comes. This is where Lacan and Bauman intersect. Lacan teaches us that desire is shaped by absence and language. In other words, it's never entirely yours. Bauman builds on this, showing how the modern system hijacks that lack and transforms it into fuel for an economy that depends on relentless desire and permanent restlessness. Together they reveal, desire is not free, it's shaped, cultivated, and manipulated. You're not just expected to want something, you're expected to want it all the time, with enthusiasm, with urgency. You have to show that desire, flaunt what you consume, and justify who you are by what you own, experience, or display. It's not enough to be. You have to appear. It's not enough to live. You have to post about it. And this exposure isn't neutral. Every photo you share, every poetic caption, reinforces what the system deems desirable, but none of it truly fills you. As Bauman points out, we live in a liquid modernity where everything slips through our fingers: objects, relationships, status, ideas. You reach a goal and another one appears. You buy something and it quickly becomes outdated. You mold yourself to be accepted, and the very next day, the standard changes. Everything moves fast with a synthetic glow and disappears just as quickly. It's a race with no finish line. At the core, it's not your desire that's being fulfilled. It's your lack that's being kept alive. The system doesn't want you to find peace, because peace halts consumption. So absence is fed like an addiction, constantly creating a new trend, a new idea of success, a more perfect body, a more exotic trip. It's all presented as freedom, but reveals itself as an aesthetic, symbolic, and emotional prison. Some might still see this as the price of autonomy, that we've never had so much access, so much information, so much freedom of expression, but freedom without awareness becomes repetition. The flood of possibilities hides a trap. You think you're choosing, but you're merely responding to a symbolic field that existed long before you. The feeling of freedom becomes a performance. Everyone plays roles they didn't write. That's why, so often, the sense of control is just that, a sense. The system has already decided for you what's desirable, what's beautiful, what's admirable. You're merely navigating the available options, believing you're exercising individuality. But the real choices, the ones that question the entire structure, are rarely visible. This realization can be painful, but it's necessary. When you understand that you're operating within a symbolic circuit that shapes you, something breaks. You begin to question the source of your decisions. Is this career you defend so passionately truly an inner calling, or just an adaptation? Are the tastes you flaunt, the content you consume, the opinions you voice the product of reflection or conditioning? Lacan would call this submission to the desire of the other, an invisible force that dictates what is acceptable to desire. Not a specific other, but the entire social field, the gaze of your parents, your friends, the algorithms. Bauman, in turn, reminds us that this field is liquid. It shifts quickly, seduces, and transforms. It doesn't impose, it invites. And the invitation is so subtle that you don't even realize you've accepted. The world doesn't bark commands, it whispers rewards. And in that whisper, freedom slips away. What's most ironic is that often, those who most believe they are in control are the most trapped. The more convinced you are of your freedom, the less you question it. The less you question, the more predictable you become. You start living inside an invisible grid where everything has already been decided. What to want, what to avoid, what to show, what to fear. And all of it happens so smoothly that it feels natural. That's how the system functions best, when everyone feels spontaneously captive. Bauman adds, identity has become a consumer product, something to build, to sell, to trade. We live in a constant narrative where we must perform at all times. With every social media post, every aesthetic choice, every public opinion, we reinforce a personal brand. But that performance comes at a high cost. It requires energy, constant vigilance, and gradually drains the most authentic parts of who you are. At the end of the day, what remains isn't presence, it's exhaustion. Not satisfaction, but noise. Maintaining an image takes so much effort that you lose the space needed to hear your own voice. And when silence finally arrives, it doesn't bring peace. It brings a question. Is there still someone in there? That fatigue slowly reveals the limits of the mask. The image that once protected you now suffocates. The persona that once fit neatly into social, professional, and romantic roles begins to feel heavier than you can carry. You realize that the effort to look fine no longer brings the feeling of being fine. The desire to please becomes a cage. The showcase, once a place of admiration, becomes a stage where you're always on display but rarely truly seen. This is the moment when many enter a crisis. But it's also the moment a crack appears in the structure. An uncomfortable silence that is both a threat and an opportunity. It's when, with fear, you begin to dismantle what isn't truly yours. And maybe for the first time, you come close to something real. Not perfect, not clear, but genuinely yours. The problem is, the system already knows about this breaking point. It doesn't confront you with repression. It seduces you with distraction. The most sophisticated trap of modern society is to transform desire into urgency. True desire requires time, listening, introspection. But the world around you was built to deny those moments. It offers you quick stimuli, constant notifications, instant replies. It doesn't want you to think, it wants you to react. You wake up and you're already behind. Your eyes aren't even open and your phone is vibrating. Emails, reminders, updates. The coffee is rushed. Social media demands a digital presence. Work demands performance. Conversations require wit, charm, common sense. Everything pulls you outside of yourself. There's no time to listen to your inner voice, because if you stop, you'll start to see. And if you see, you'll begin to dismantle. And the system knows, if you truly see, there's no going back. Lacan used to say that desire is born out of lack, but that lack must be recognized and listened to, not smothered by constant stimuli. Bauman, observing our times, noticed acceleration turns wanting into impulse. You don't have time to desire thoughtfully. You have to act. Click, comment, reply, prove. Desire becomes reflex, a mechanical movement. The space where you might have found yourself disappears. That's why so many people are exhausted, even while surrounded by endless options. Freedom has turned into anxiety. You can do everything, and so you feel you must do everything. You can't miss out. You can't fail. A day without posting is a day of invisibility. A single mistake threatens your reputation. Silence is interpreted as negligence, and so true desire gets trampled. It's too slow for this world. It demands presence, and presence doesn't generate profit. This exhaustion carries a high internal cost. You begin to live in response to your environment. Every decision becomes a reaction, every desire a reply, and even when you achieve what you wanted, something inside you remains silent, because deep down, something was missing. You. The forgotten part, the silenced voice, the will without a schedule. To rediscover real desire, you have to reclaim time. Not clock time, but inner time. The time of the body, of doubt, of non-answers. The time to get lost so you can eventually find yourself. But this kind of time doesn't fit in the modern world. It's seen as unproductive, as failure, as deviation. That's why today, slowing down is an act of rebellion. And when you slow down, it's not peace that comes first. It's strangeness. The silence you longed for reveals itself to be uncomfortable. In that silence, everything you had hidden starts to surface. Suppressed questions grow louder. Who am I without other people's expectations? What remains of me when I'm not trying to please? Is there something in me that was never just a performance? This is lonely territory. Many of your old references no longer fit. Conversations lose their shine. Projects feel hollow. Relationships grow thin. You look at the world, and it seems to vibrate at a different frequency. People keep laughing, posting, moving forward, but you can no longer pretend it makes sense. This loneliness is not superficial. It cuts deep, reaching an intimate place. The realization that, even surrounded by people, you were alone, not physically alone, but symbolically. There was always a negotiation, an editing of who you were in order to be accepted. When that layer falls away, what's left is exile. Not an exile imposed on you, a chosen one. Because staying would demand too high a price, the abandonment of yourself. Here, many hesitate because lucidity is costly. It isolates, silences, separates. You start to wonder who will stay, who will recognize you without the mask, who will understand your silence, who will withstand your pause. The answer often is very few. Very, very few. And that's why awakening doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence. A thick, heavy, necessary silence. A silence that isn't absence, but gestation. It's there, in the void left by the dismantled character, that something new begins to form. Still nameless, still shapeless, but already yours. Even without knowing where it will lead you, you realize you cannot go back. Going back would be a betrayal of a truth that has already revealed itself. What has been seen cannot be unseen. What has been felt cannot be forgotten. You may not know exactly where you're headed, but you know for certain you're not going back. This silent withdrawal, which begins inside, soon becomes visible on the outside. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to confront anyone. You just have to stop repeating. Stop laughing at the same jokes. Stop desiring what everyone else desires. That alone is enough to disturb. Because in a world built on mirrors, where everyone validates in others what they need to believe themselves, someone who no longer reflects the pattern becomes a threat. You don't have to criticize. Just don't follow. Don't get excited about what excites the majority. Keep silent where there used to be performance. Your presence becomes unsettling. You start to notice the looks, the subtle absences, the sideways smiles. You've changed, they say. But what they really mean is, you're no longer validating us the way you used to. Your silent refusal breaks an unspoken pact. Pacts don't have to be voiced to be enforced. Lacan said that the subject who breaks from the desire of the other is seen as a deviation, a piece that no longer fits into the symbolic machine. They stop validating the social games and start to stand out. It unsettles, it threatens. Because your mere existence outside the machinery reveals a possibility, that it's possible not to conform. And for a system that depends on repetition, that possibility is unbearable. Bauman would add, the individual who slows down, who no longer follows the liquid promises of instant happiness, can no longer be predicted, labeled, domesticated. And whatever cannot be predicted must be neutralized, not through direct confrontation, but through invisibility, ridicule, subtle disqualification. Society doesn't need to eliminate you. It just needs to make you seem irrelevant. The different is treated as weak, as strange, as someone who has lost the rhythm, not because they truly are, but because their silent existence reminds others that there are other ways to live. And that wounds the invisible agreement, the collective pact, that ensures everyone will keep wanting what they've always wanted, following what they've always followed, without questioning too much. This movement of exclusion isn't always conscious. Often those who pull away don't do so out of rebellion, but out of incompatibility. Something inside you no longer fits. You no longer respond to the same calls, no longer move by the same impulses. And others sense this, not rationally, but intuitively, like someone realizing they've lost their mirror. You become uncomfortable, not because you attacked anyone, but because you refused something. Because you didn't smile, didn't participate, didn't engage. And without saying a word, you show that it's possible to leave the game. That shakes the entire system. By no longer desiring what everyone else desires, you reveal that their desires may not be genuine either. When you realize this, the temptation to go back might arise, to try to explain yourself, to soften your difference. But gradually you understand it wasn't you who left. It was your consciousness that no longer fit. And no matter how lonely it may seem, it marks the beginning of a rare freedom. A freedom that doesn't sparkle but sustains. A freedom that doesn't excite but liberates. There comes a moment when you stop justifying yourself. You no longer feel the need to explain why you pulled away, why you slowed down, why you chose silence. This isn't arrogance, it's maturity. A kind of lucid exhaustion that understands some paths simply aren't worth the effort just to keep up the appearance of normalcy. You're not lost, you're refusing. And that quiet refusal is one of the most powerful forms of resistance. Lacan saw the act of desiring for oneself, even in defiance of everything you were taught, as an ethical gesture. To sustain an authentic desire takes courage. In today's world, that's almost heroic. Bauman observed that everything has become fluid. Objects, feelings, ideas. Nothing can pause, nothing can settle. Nothing is allowed to take root. Everything must circulate, generate engagement, produce effect. And anyone who disrupts that cycle is seen as a problem or as a ghost. That's why the person who says no, who doesn't buy, doesn't participate, doesn't display, becomes subversive. They interrupt the rhythm. They impose a pause. They show that it's possible to live differently, in a way that can't be explained by numbers or translated into trends, a way that is simply their own. Not desiring what others expect of you isn't giving up on life. It's reclaiming the right to live it with depth. It means protecting yourself from the promises of instant fulfillment. It means guarding, like something sacred, that small fragment of truth still pulsing inside you, even if it's faint, even if it's forgotten, but still alive. This resistance doesn't need an explanation. It comes from experience, from the exhaustion of living a lie, from the pain of playing a role, from the fatigue of repeating yourself. That's what pushes you out. Not a noble ideal, but the sheer impossibility of continuing to pretend. You begin to realize that you don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to please, explain, or compete. The time once consumed by comparisons, emotional commitments, and the quest for approval now opens up like a new field. A space where, for the first time in a long while, you can breathe. Refusal transforms into space. It becomes relief. It becomes dignity. You start to protect your silence like someone guarding a rare seed. Because within it, something real can grow. Not to be sold, not to be validated, but simply to exist. After everything, the doubt, the discomfort, the withdrawal, something begins to shift. Not with a grand explosion, but subtly. What changes is not the world, but how you listen to it. You no longer react automatically. You no longer run without knowing why. You're no longer impressed by easy promises. The sense of absence is still there, but now it's not a burden. It's a compass. Lacan said that true desire is born when you can endure lack without trying to fill it at any cost. That takes a rare kind of maturity, a wisdom that can't be learned from books or taught in courses. It only emerges after all distractions have failed, and you've stayed. When nothing in the outside world can seduce you anymore, something within you begins to rise. And with that, a new question appears. What truly matters to me? That question doesn't come with a quick answer. Sometimes there's no clear answer at all, but it changes everything. Because it changes how you walk through the world. You no longer need to be seen as special. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to compete. You can simply exist. And that existence, which once felt like too little, now becomes enough and sacred. Bauman would remind us, in a society where everything slips away, the most revolutionary act is to remain in yourself, faithful to your own experience, even if it's not popular, whole, even without applause. That doesn't bring visibility, but it offers something no image can provide: consistency. Authentic desire doesn't make noise. It doesn't need a showcase or applause or validation. It doesn't rush, it whispers. It is born slowly, like someone waking from a deep sleep, deep within the soul where the world has not yet touched. It feels almost like a forgotten memory, something that was always there, but silenced by urgency, by masks, by distractions. This kind of desire doesn't demand transformation. It doesn't ask you to become someone else. It simply invites. It invites you to return, to come back barefoot and heart open to that forgotten starting point. A place that existed before the labels, before the comparisons, before the need to please. That silent moment where everything you were was already enough. And in that return, slow and steady, you rediscover something you might not have even known you lost: yourself.